Hi everyone, could you come in and take your seats, please? How was lunch? Yeah? Yes. Awesome. Right. We are going to do a panel discussion. No more hanging around, waiting for PowerPoints to load. This is all going to be talk, so it's a proper human interaction. And the main qualification for joining this panel was that your name starts with A. So we've got Atte, Arttu, Anni, and Anu. Who doesn't? Well, no, but I'm chairing. It's different. So it's like a kind of alt protein supergroup. It's like the ABBA of the food transition. Yeah. I can't pronounce your second name, so I'm going to pass the mic round and ask everyone just to give a quick introduction to themselves. We're familiar with several of you already as speakers, but tell us your name and tell us where you come from and quick introduction. Starting with you, Atte.
Yep. Thank you, Mark. So Atte Harjanne, I'm a member of Parliament here in Finland, representing the Green Party, and I've been actually a member of WePlanet since the start. And I think I will bring fresh perspective to the discussion, since I didn't hear what people were talking about in the morning. But of course, transforming agriculture and food into within planetary boundaries is a key issue, and something I've been involved with in politics as well.
Hi, I'm Anni Seisto from VTT, leading a team called Future Customer there. So I'm not really into food technology like Emilia presenting earlier today, but working together with her a lot, thinking about how to communicate about new foods, cellular agriculture, how to involve different stakeholders in the discussion and taking the people perspective to the future.
Anni Savikurki from the Ministry of Agriculture and Forestry, where I coordinate the food sector growth program, and also I'm part of the food system strategy work.
And Arttu Luukanen, Senior Vice President of Space and Defense at Solar Foods. You heard about if you were here, so you know what it's all about. Great to be here.
Thanks, Arttu. So I thought I'd be keen to hear a bit more from you, Atte, from a kind of green perspective. I was thrown out of the Greens about 15 years ago for being pro-GMO and pro-nuclear. And I kind of wonder where the green political ferment is on the food transition issue, because it, a lot of the time it's a bit, the conventional green perspective is quite sort of backward looking. It's like things were better in medieval times, we should eat natural, all this kind of stuff. But actually you don't seem to share that at all. So how does that work? Is there a big schism within the Green Party scene, or is it you just allow that kind of diversity?
Yeah. So I'm also pro-nuclear, pro-GMO, and I got elected to Parliament, and then the vice chair of the party, and then the group leader of the Parliament.
Blows
so welcome to Finland. So I think we have a strong pro-science stance within the party, and of course these are issues that I don't want to say split, but of course there are different views within the party, but I would say no dogmatic that you have to be in certain stance. So it's more like ends over means, that we need to, as said, transform our economy and society into such condition that we stay in the planetary boundaries in a sustainable way, and then look at the best means for that. As for actually these matters, we have party congress decisions, programs that clearly state that our current status is pro or neutral to nuclear, but also pro-GMO or accepting GMO. So it's not that contested issue with the party anymore. And I think we see it as one of the tools with regenerative agriculture, organic farming, whatever. But so we have a set of tools on how to make food more sustainably. And this is one of them. But
I mean, at the EU level, the EU seems to be unbelievably shit, right? It took them 2 years even to open your email, or, as you tell the story. How can anything new, how can the EU ever have innovation if it's going to be so slow to do anything and also so backward-looking and so captured by these established interests? And which side of the argument are the Greens on in, let's say, in the European Parliament?
Well, I would say if you look at the European Greens, they are, I said the Finnish Greens are more ahead, more progressive in these terms. But at the same time, I think the Greens have been in the EU as well, one of the kind of drivers to transform the system in a way and kind of change the status quo. And I think the answer, if EU isn't able to change its view, we're gonna be kind of we're gonna be unable to keep our commitments regarding biodiversity and climate, and also we're going to be dependent on innovations and technologies outside the EU. So it needs to change, and of course this is something that I've been vocally trying to work on, and also discussing with colleagues from other countries, because you need to. I think this is something that needs both the Parliament in the EU, but also the member states to be active on changing the status.
Yeah, because I'll maybe bring this to you, Anni. You can produce Solin here in Finland, but you can't sell it here in Finland because you're in the EU, and the EU process is completely gummed up and untransparent and so on. Maybe you need a Fexit. We had Brexit, which means you can sell Solin in. So yeah, maybe hear from both of you on that.
Yeah, it is interesting in the sense that at the same time we have the largest sort of hydrogen transformation slash food project grant notification from the EU of 110 million euros. So the right foot is on the gas pedal, but the left foot is pressing on the brakes quite hard. And Atte, you were not here when I mentioned this, but I heard from my friend who is pretty much in the center of when it comes to things in Brussels. And we talked about this problem with EFSA. And I was told that the problem is that they are understaffed. And I said that that's not a problem. That's not a problem that can't be fixed. But then I was told that, it's because there's no English school in Parma. Nobody wants to move there. So they can't get the staff. So because of the lack of an English school in Parma, Europe is falling behind in bio-manufacturing industry. As an example, Onegobio, another great Finnish alternative protein company, announced that they will build their first factory in the United States because of the regulatory uncertainties and the lack of visibility to the duration of the process and general opacity. How long does it take to get into that? Because obviously for like any pre-revenue company, like basically we still are, and Onego certainly is, it's hard to convince investors. You go to them and say, give us 50 million, and we'll make lots of money at some point. And then they ask, when is that going to happen? Well, we don't know. Ask EFSA. So it's a untenable investment proposition, basically.
It's indeed quite a shame that, as you just described, that we have such great companies and then we can't even, produce and consume it here, make the business here in Finland due to the EU regulations and the systems. So I don't know. So let's get the school in Parma so we actually get some change. I don't know. But of course, also EU, we all know that it's slow because, there must be the unanimous decision, the conclusions if some countries are a bit of opposing side, as some countries might be on this case as well. So how do we influence those countries? Or then we have to change the ways that the EU works, and then I don't and well, that's basically all what we can do. Of course, we can staff EFSA, but also, of course, Commission also has a role there in the process of these applications. So also, Commission side needs some extra resources there too.
And we need to hear maybe more of the voice of the Finnish government in the European institutions. I heard from someone earlier that Denmark tends to lead the conversation from the Nordics on this. I don't know, is this something you've heard, or would you strongly push back on that?
I don't know. That might be true. I don't. Well, yeah. Me myself personally, I'm not there in those discussions, and I think maybe if that's the voice that you hear, maybe we should do more as Finland, and maybe we should keep more voice.
Maybe send that upstairs to the ministers. So I want to hear from VTT on this as well. Like your colleague showed the slide earlier on, which was trying to help these startups get across the valley of death. But if the valley of death is more like an ocean, which just goes on and on and on, you know, how can you do your job and actually expect these new industries to thrive?
Yes, well, that's a good question because we do research, so we're trying to convince and take different stakeholders into the discussion of what should be done and what the future could be. But it's from our perspective, it's also a slow process, but it's something that hopefully takes to the right direction. So, for example, we foster these type of discussions of what the future of food or food of the future that way could be. We have had these workshops, dinner in the future, where we take people to the restaurant, we give them a story that this is how the food is produced, and then we eat together and discuss what does it feel like, what should we do to reach this future, and how do we make sure that we are part of the in the shaping the future. So these are the kind of examples that we can do. It's part of the process, hopefully, but it's not something that happens very fast.
Atte, I'll come back to you. I'd quite like to rejoin the Green Party one day. At the moment, I'm in exile in Labour. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, you're the only one who has a political vision which is actually coherent, right? Because it is able to feed a world of 8 billion people without destroying all of nature and the climate and so on. And it's weird that we can't get this more widely appreciated. And I wonder, you know, when you tell the story of Solin and the alternative proteins and so on, if that shouldn't be a bit more emphasized. I mean, I did a presentation earlier before you came, and I was trying to connect alt proteins with land sparing and rewilding and ecological restoration. And I think unless you tell the whole spectrum of that story, it's less compelling. But maybe not that many people care about the nature side of things. Maybe they only care about the health and wellness and, you know, the protein supplements and things that you're pushing for your initial niche markets. So I'd just like to hear, you know, you're a green. How strongly do you think people really care about nature, and will that be a driver for the alternative proteins movement?
I think, especially here, people do care about nature in an emotional way. If you ask about it, like what things you for example, what matter in politics and so on. But then the kind of system level kind of actions, consequences, type of thinking is quite hard to communicate in a way, because if you would ask probably a person around what's the biggest problem regarding restoration and conserving nature in Finland, they would maybe say something like, okay, building buildings in cities or railways or something like that. And whereas if you look at the impact of the food system, that's the massive, of course, the massive thing there. Well, here in Finland, other things as well. But so I think that the connection isn't perhaps there. I'm an engineer by my background, education, so I like the graphs where you kind of and try to sell it that way. But I think also it's important to have different views. There is the kind of fundamental limits of the planet. Then you have perhaps more like health-based things, different types of, and probably Arttu knows about this, a lot of different kind of messages to different people, and that's important to keep in mind. So different ways of kind of communicating, different balancing between emotions or facts drive different people. But I think here, this food security, for example, is now an issue that's clearly something that people resonate with in this time and age. Okay, this can improve our food security. That's a big thing. So yeah, you kind of also have to live in time. I was just wondering, maybe the ministry could put a couple of millions on teaching Italian to Finnish agri students. So that could be the way to get this. Because Parma is a beautiful place, what I've heard, and good food and good wine and everything. So
it's famous for its ham, though. Any other comments on the nature part of the narrative here? Yes, go ahead.
We've been carrying out consumer studies as well. And one thing that we have noticed when segmenting people based on their possibility to change their behavior towards more sustainable eating, and there's a small minority of people who don't care about sustainability at all. It's a very small percentage. But then there's quite a high percentage of people who think that they don't want to identify themselves as sustainable. They would eat exactly the same food as people who say that we want to eat sustainably, but they want to identify themselves as people who care about their health. So I think it's a quite large proportion of people who are interested in eating healthy food, they eat sustainably, but they don't want to identify themselves as sustainable for some reason.
Weird.
Yeah. But I think it's also maybe some kind of a phase that there's still these traces of history when if you wanted to eat vegetarian food, you must be a hippie, and it's not a it's not a positive thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that is still affecting how people want to be seen.
No, it's not. I hate hippies too. That's not a positive thing. Go back.
Yeah, I think this sounds like a phenomena or dynamic that's really frustrating in the world, and you have a culture war igniting everywhere. Like anything becomes a culture war at some point, and that's really frustrating as a politician and everything. Whether it's EVs, whether it's nuclear, whether it's cellular food, whatever. But as a politician, I think it's very important to try to avoid that as long as possible and not emphasize that, and try to find all the allies in different kind of spectrums of policy and people as long as you can.
Except there are politicians who've built whole movements on polarization.
Exactly.
And been extremely successful in doing that. Yep. I'm glad you're not one of them. Yeah. Both of you?
Ladies first.
Put you on the spot there, Annie.
I don't know if I have much to add on that, but exactly, I'm also getting frustrated in the how the discussion always gets to that polarized way. That how cannot. Are we simply so simple that we cannot make this really like an how to say sophisticated or whatever, like even a normal discussion about things? Why do we always have to go in the other ends? I mean,
well, I'll ask. But your Ministry of Agriculture and Forest. Never mind about the forest, but the agriculture bit. Oh, right. But, normally the farmers are the first line of opposition to alternative protein stuff. They're out in the Netherlands parking their tractors, stop lab meat, whatever. So how do you reconcile those competing agendas within the ministry?
Yeah, I think it's exactly about the fact that we discuss things together with everybody, and we try to spread the understanding, and also the fact that the alternative proteins are not away from the traditional farming, and there's a lot we can do within the traditional farming, not like land-based traditional farming, that are also technological new innovation solutions that can make it more sustainable. And I think that's the way we can do things in the traditional agriculture. At the same time, we can have these new technologies and novel ways, and even they can benefit from each other, as we discussed this morning, how we can, maybe it's not in your business model, but how the side streams of various agricultural processes, the side streams can be used as an input for the cellular solutions. So I think it's the pace of the change is so fast. Also, we just discussed about during the lunch how fast things are developing, and how we have to. And if you look at farming, the quarter, like if we talk about business quarters, the quarter for a farmer is 25 years. Basically, I mean, it's really like you do the changes, you need time, and then I think it's just a matter of also understanding the issue, that really including everybody in that discussion, and make it, just and just transition, the keyword hashtag here in everything. So I think I want to be optimistic about it, that we can make the change so that everybody can benefit, and we don't need to go in that that. Or the other end discussion.
Yeah, several points here. So when it comes to like customers and consumers adopting more sustainable, let's say, food solutions, I'm a bit of a cynic in the sense that it's often actually price. That you know, especially in a low income country like Finland, or you could say high taxation. But anyway, so it's ultimately the consumer who makes a decision. You know, and if there's a box of, you know, regular minced meat and it comes at a price X, and then you have the more sustainable solution at 1.6 or 2X, that consumer most likely is going to choose the less sustainable solution. So that's one thing. The other thing is about the adoption in general, and this kind of we talked about polarization, which we see everywhere. This sort of anti-wokeism. My biggest fear is that cellular ag becomes woke, but that's partly because of this speed of change. We often forget the fact that we are when it comes to like technological advancement, we are on an exponential. So things are moving today at the pace. So if you went 10 years back, it would be a lot slower, and if you went 20 years back, it would be even. You know, I was a kid in the 80s. You know, nothing happened. I mean, really, until sort of the internet came. So we are on an exponential curve, and we, as biological species, have difficulty in coping with the speed of change, and it then results into these all sorts of political situations where people get really anxious about this change. They want to go back into the old-fashioned, traditional ways of doing things because it brings comfort. Because those are the things that they are, you know, people are used to. It's familiar, and then we are getting like this gazillion new things coming out of the pipe at them all the time. So, you know, I feel empathy to the fact that people are a little bit spooked by all the new things. You know, AI, cellular agriculture, cultivated meat, all these sort of things. So we have to bear that in mind. That also has to be taken as a part of the messaging as well. Then I had a third point, but I forgot about it already.
That's all right. It'll probably pop up. Yeah, the messaging I think is so key on this, and the kind of the words and the identity and the branding. I mean, Ida, you raised this. What do we call this whole sort of spectrum of different things? And you know, the attributes that it's going to have associated within people's minds isn't clear yet. You said you don't want it to be woke, and actually, I think. You know, I hate Elon Musk for what he's become, but initially he really did an enormous service for electric vehicles by making it a desirable sports car type image. Before that, it was like milk delivery van and golf carts and stuff. Like people didn't think electric cars could go fast or do anything or have any kind of masculine attributes.
Or be launched to space.
Yeah, yeah. So, what should we try to create in terms of associations in people's minds for alternative proteins? Like George Monbiot, if you know him, he helped launch ReBoot Food when we started this campaign in 2023, and I went for a walk with him on around that time, and we were trying to think about this, and we came up with the idea of farm-free foods, right? Nice alliteration, but the farmers probably aren't going to like it. So, like, what's the best notion that any of you've come up with? I mean, lab meat's pretty bad. What was it? Cellular agriculture was one, but yeah. Do you have one, and then we'll just go.
Well, I do. Somebody said it earlier, and I've said this also before, that I like the word brewing because that's essentially what we're doing, and brewing has been around for thousands of years.
That's not cultured meat is not brewing.
So cultured meat is not brewing. Okay, so it wouldn't apply to that. But let's say to what we do, Onegobio does, well, arguably, Enifer, you could sort of argue that that's kind of a new form of brewing protein. There is actually a company, I believe, that's called Protein Brewery, and I think they're hitting the nail with that.
Okay.
I very much like the notion of ingredient production, but of course that doesn't then apply to everything, and that's the challenge. We don't really have a term that will, cover everything. So that's why we stick with cellular agriculture, which might, raise some suspicions in some people's mind who really don't know what's it about. So I don't know. I don't have a solution here.
It's like renewable energy. Somebody came up with the term renewable, which doesn't automatically attach itself to solar and wind, but which was brilliant. Same as natural gas, right? There's no reason. What's natural about gas anyway? Then we'll.
Yeah. Yeah, you have the right answers. You actually studied this. So I was wondering that the word with a really like bad sound is of course processing and processed, and so that needs to be avoided, that kind of mindset. But I think like this, having this, that it's clean, fresh, healthy. I like that you're doing the space stuff. That's perhaps just me, but I think that's an attribute, that this is space food. It's something that can actually gives it a futuristic vibe in a sense. But I think this is a super important question for the companies, but also for the whole change in a way. So this is not like, okay, everyone's going to be eating grey goo from now on, and that's the vision for
it's yellow goo, actually. But
oh, yeah. So in that sense, that's of course, that doesn't fly. But I was just going to add that actually I have a good, being from a party that's often toe-to-toe with the farmers in politics, this is something where I think the Finnish farmers are, I think they're in general quite pro-tech in a way. And this is actually something we wrote an op-ed like a couple of years ago with the head of the lobby organization of farmers, regarding that Finland should take a more active stance in changing the GMO regulation in EU and so on. So that's actually something we've been finding common ground, and I think it's very important, as you said, the farm-free thing is a bit risky, because it's very important to keep these people in mind that this is actually, if we produce the share of our food through this way, it actually enables kind of also more type of farming, perhaps, that they feel more comfortable with, and so on. So it takes certain pressure away from making farming something if we can produce a bigger share of our food through cellular agriculture.
I know.
Yes, I think anything that starts with lab is bad, because it makes it sound that some crazy scientist has come up with an idea, and it's not very safe. So it doesn't sound good.
So science is identified with lack of safety, is it?
No, the lab food. It sounds like that it's not safe to eat. But then I actually like the term cellular agriculture, because it says cellular, it's growing cells, and then agriculture reminds of producing food. So I think it really easily explains that what it is about, and it sounds quite technical, and that's something that for some people it does resemble very processed food. But it is processed also. Almost everything we eat is processed. So I think where I think we should be going is normalizing things and giving examples of eating, like what you were eating yesterday, that it's normal food. For example, I got a question in one of our projects from actually an university person, so should be very well aware of what we are doing. But she was thinking that also that what are we eating in the future? That is it protein powder? And I was sort of thinking that why is somebody asking that protein powder is not a new product? It can be bought from the shop today, and I haven't seen anybody eating it directly from the bag. Why would we do that in the future? So that just tells that there's a lot to do with normalizing what the food is and how it is produced.
Yeah, we should have a kind of cinnamon challenge of protein powder, shouldn't we? How much you can eat, how much solen you can eat dry. I wonder, should we ask the audience on this? Does anyone have I won't do a vote because we don't necessarily have all the right options here, but yes, I want to get mics to you so that you can be heard as well. Where is it? Oh, here.
So Carolina and we were discussing about this, and we are also an impact fund investing in this space. As a vegan fund we were investing in a lot of all proteins, called it smart proteins in between, when GFI was also thinking, why not just call food? Because basically you have proteins, ingredients come from diverse sources. It comes from plants, it comes from whatever. And some of the companies that we actually start seeing was, there is a company that we backed called Ingrediome, which is doing cyanobacteria precision fermentation. And they are making sausages which has 55 or 60% protein packed with this. And they are actually planning to sell this as a meat product. And packed with other leftover, whatever you get it from the microalgae or cyanobacteria that you get. So I think it's a thing that we have been thinking a lot within our team also as an approach, what we call it protein diversification or ingredient diversification, where the sources come from. We could be more transparent, but why do we need to call anything else apart from food? This is also food.
Because we already have food. I mean, there's some novelty to this. This is a transition towards a different type of food.
I'll just add to his point. I think the most important piece of the puzzle becomes cost parity. And I'll be very honest, people think and blame a lot of corporates. We have seen corporates are saying, give us a cost parity solution, we'll adopt, period. Like people like Grupo Bimbo, very big corporates have put a lot of money, Ajinomoto, a lot of South Korean food manufacturers have put money. I think there was mismatch of what people have achieved as entrepreneurs also, but so again, for them, they see as food. They are not seeing as like, oh, you are giving me something new.
Right.
Yeah, that's my take.
That's a vote for food. Did you still want to?
I had a question.
Oh, we'll do the whole question thing in a minute. This is kind of an ask the audience for what we call this whole new movement. Atte, did you? Yeah, brainstorming. Can you just?
It's painless meat. Call it
Painless meat. Okay.
That's it.
It becomes a vegan agenda.
Yeah. Well, it does become a vegan agenda. Yeah, but that appeals to quite. How big is the vegan constituency? Does anyone know? It's like, is it just 2 or 3%, or is it
about 3%?
3% globally. Okay.
The right answer.
Yeah.
No right answers, I'm afraid. But I was thinking that what about when we have, if people think that will we be eating protein powder? What if we give them something more like go through some, like this is the protein porridge. If you produce a grey goo, call it something that it's like porridge and it's protein porridge, or like this is your it's like a new sort of pesto. Give it like some kind of foodstuffs that we already eat, some kind of formative food, and use that name. And then I was thinking that actually probably you need several messages. I mean, obviously you can have backfire. People who want to eat all natural don't like cellular agriculture, I'm afraid, because maybe normalization will fix it. But what about if you actually sell it as grey goo? There will be young people and counterintuitive ideas. They will find suddenly something that's really off-putting to the older generation, like the new cool thing. Like, this is what we do. We eat the grey goo. Be creative. Do market research in different kind of niche groups and niche, like Japanese youth.
I'm not sure this is going very well. We've had a vote. We've had a vote for food and a vote for grey goo so far. Can you try and keep it down to like 10 words as well? And let's just go along, because loads of people got hands up, and I want to make sure we do come to the back. We'll get you, Patricia, and Guido as well.
So this is more a sort of a contributing comment, not a question. My father-in-law, he insists eating håkonsininen, this really processed Finnish sausage, at least once a day. Well, it's probably the easiest, probably one of the easiest thing to replace by, for example, soy. He wouldn't know the difference, but my point is that he still wants that same stuff. And the world, especially in terms of food, it changes by one funeral at a time. So I think this is one of the fields in sort of sustainability that where we just have to be patient. And it's not, I think this guy, my father-in-law, he's a sort of lost case. But I wouldn't waste too much time on his cohort. But in any case, my point is that even if the sort of response right now might be a little bit reluctant, in the long run, I would say.
What's this thing called?
It's HK Blue.
Okay, and you can make that. Can you make that out of Solin if you just put some dye in it? And
I don't think we need any dyes.
I thought it was blue. Yours is yellow.
Then call it HK Blue.
It's grey, actually.
Oh, grey. Perfect. Grey goose sausage. I love it. Joel, did you want to?
Yeah. Refocusing us here slightly on possible names. I'm interested in the word clean meats, clean protein, in as much as that I think that's one of the best selling points, is that actually animal production it's dirty. It's full of fecal matter and antibiotics pumped full of it, and it's just, this seems something appealing to me.
Only the vegans know that. Only the vegans care about that.
But it's a messaging strong point, right?
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you, Joel. That was unusually serious and helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Rowley,
say that
you'll bring the tone down again, won't
nobody cares because nobody knows
Yeah.
what Joel just said. I'm actually with the first gentleman, just call it food, because for whom are we thinking that this needs to have a new name? It's the 0.1%. Most of here belong to that 0.1%
We are
who
that
actually,
0.1,
who want to show, and they need to know the name that the new cool thing is called. And then they go to the store and they know that, okay, this is the new cool thing. I'll buy that because I'm gonna, what's the term? Yes, exactly, thank you.
What did you say?
Virtue single, my virtue.
I thought you said virgin and single,
yeah.
but yeah.
But if you actually want to scale, you just call it nothing. It's just in the HK and Bleu and nobody knows.
Well, I mean, there's early adopters, and this is often the way that things get into market. Anyway,
but especially we are sensitive to this because we are those people who want to know what we are eating and how it's sustainable, and everybody else doesn't.
And we
give
are
a
that
fuck.
whole movement in this room, yeah. So go into the next row, please. And let's try and keep this down to 10 words. That was at least 200, Rowley.
Yeah, I was just thinking that you might want to avoid associating a specific identity with this kind of food, and maybe you should really work to make it identity-less, and you can basically put it into any food, and it doesn't need to be branded as vegan or anything.
Yeah, I do worry if we don't, the positive side doesn't come up with an identity, then the negative will frame it in reverse.
Yeah.
They call it lab meat or pink slime, or they're produced in vats. I mean, it's the GMO thing which looms over this whole.
Yeah, I mean, the people
Grey Goo was,
who eat it don't need a specific identity. It's more we can have a good branding of it, but we don't want it to be we need to do all of these things, check all the boxes before you eat it. Yeah.
Along.
We're not going to have a lot of time for questions if we continue.
Well, this is more interesting than questions anyway. I mean, yeah, this is fine. We could do something useful here. I mean, the rest of it's just entertainment. So
I think there's a distinction I'd make in what are we actually trying to name in what you're asking, because some of these are about the end product, which is what the goo is, and I think that's the wrong thing to name, because that's the bit that you want to be normalized. That's the bit that you don't want to be a different thing.
That's the sausage. That's the sausage.
That's the sausage. Yeah. Whereas phrases like cellular agriculture, well, regardless whether it's good phrase or not, but that's not a thing. That's not a product. That's a way you make something.
A process.
And I think that's a process. Yeah. And I was hesitant to use that word because we don't like processed foods. But that is the process, and that's the thing that I think we're trying to name, because that's the bit you need to describe as being done in a fresh and clean way, but without ending up with something significantly different at the other end, because it's of emphasizing that this is an ingredient thing, not a different thing that you're going to eat. So to me, it does need a name, but what you're looking for a name for is not actually the product, it's the process.
So given that you used to work as a consultant for Evil Corp Inc., doing exactly this kind of thing, what would you give us?
Oh, an invoice.
Which we would not be able to pay, so I don't think you need to answer that. Behind, over there in that case.
If we were any good at marketing, probably this would be a 2,000 people event, so probably ask other people. But pristine meat, pure harvest, oral food, so I would ABC test it, and probably this could be a good application for a grant or so to test it in different supermarkets and target groups and try what sticks.
Thank you. Has anyone asked ChatGPT yet?
What about another idea? Why do we have to use one specific term? Why can't we just accept that, different people will react to different food? For example, since Solin wants to go in the sports area, then you can, for example, just call it be better, beef up without beef, for example. And that would resonate with, let's say, people who want to bulk up, but don't like to be cruel to animals for something. So, just my line of thinking.
Go on,
I just have a comment to throw in here, because it's one thing to, and what we're really talking about here is kind of the messaging, and how when we write articles or op-eds or whatever, how we call it. But then there's the regulatory side also. So if you put out products that contain ingredients such as ours, there's a specific labeling that needs to be used. So if you have like microbial protein there, it has to be said in the labeling. And I think in the US market, our products need to say microbial protein powder from Xanthobacter, which is the species of the bacteria that we ferment. Yeah. Right. So, but I think maybe the regulatory side may be a helpful discussion to talk about, what is the labeling requirement? Because that you have to stamp on the side of each box. And many people, they do read, what's in this. Vanishing ink.
Actually, I wanted to talk about labeling because I don't think we have the luxury of just saying it's food. First of all, there is already a reactionary movement calling it lab meat and grey goo, etc. So you need something to replace that in the public eye. But the second thing is there's currently a labeling proposal dropped in the EU Commission banning any alternative proteins from using familiar terms. So we already can't call things milk that aren't coming from another. And we won't be able to call it, you can call something that is actually a stand-in replacement for chicken and call it, this is something like chicken. So there is definitely something that you have to do against that because they're going to tell us what you cannot put on the label, etc. So I don't think we have the luxury of saying, it's just food.
Round at the back. I do want to get all the way to the back. So really quick. You've already had a go, Amadeo. You were very short, actually. Shout it though while we're moving the mic. Well, it's called. There's a brand called This Isn't Chicken, isn't there? Yeah.
Finally, Joel gave my name. I wanted to suggest clean, but as people were speaking, I thought we maybe should come up with a simple name that describes what this food is. In school, they told us proteins are essential proteins, so we can call it essential food. We can call it clean food, living food. We worry so much. Someone woke up one day and said football is the beautiful game. I think running is a more beautiful game, but you just come up with something that works, simple, and we go with that. So I'm suggesting essential, clean, living, but the food is there. So we are describing our new food.
Thank you. Guido, do you have since the mic's all up there?
Yeah. Something that I think that we don't have also luxury is not just the regulatory part, but also if we try to be exactly what the natural thing is, for the end user, you end up with a steak that has no difference, no benefits, no advantage, but has all the load of all the rumors and all the innuendo, all the misinformation. That's exactly what happened with GMOs. Which was the GMO that became popular? The fucking pink pineapple. It's not natural, but it's very Instagram friendly. We need to come up with something that we proudly go out and, yes, this is not natural, but it's so fucking cool. We need to stop pretending just to, we're never gonna go unnoticed.
Speaking as someone who spent a lot of time in the GMO issue, not least because I was on both sides of the debate for at least 10 years each way. So I'm pretty well versed in what happened with the whole GMO thing. We really, really, really have to make sure that doesn't happen here. So I don't know. Thoughts on that? And what else are you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say that I kind of leaning to the just call it food school, but there is the regulatory thing. If you look at product like fish fingers, I think the fish what fish it contains has changed because we've been running low on different kinds of fish for overfishing is different than it was in my childhood, but few people realize this. But we can't call them fish fingers if they're made out of solein because it's not fish, and this is where the challenge becomes. That's why we don't have the luxury. But I was gonna just lie with
fishy fingers.
Fishy fingers, yeah. There's something fishy in there. But I was going to go with Guido and perhaps just make it like glowing green in a way. Can you do it? So that would be something completely new. Just eat like goo that glows in the dark and go there.
Let's Soylent Green. No, do you get Soylent Green? No.
I told our communications director that this could be a bit of a problem with the older crowd.
He'd not read the book or seen.
But there are two things to actually look at. One is when you just talk about pure ingredients. One, you talk about the end products, like that you are saying fish fingers or chicken steak and whatever. Because like Soylent and we have many ingredient companies, what approach you take, because like you think about lactoferrin or like whey, casein, they are using downstream processing, they are getting extracted from milk in terms of getting the protein process. It's a great process. Everybody who is beefing up actually use whey. They could use soybean, they could use something. So to me, ingredients positioning would be very different than if you're doing a replica of the chicken, of the steak.
Thank you. We're wrapping up now, but Ia, you have a loud voice, so just quickly.
So I think it's worth saying
You know what I mean?
we can also direct ourselves in directions where we don't require this type of individual marketing. I think it's very worth talking about, can we sell this to municipalities, for hospitals or for schools, and for more large-scale food producers, that there is not going to be a name. You're at most is going to say like, today we serve lasagna, and if you know that much, you're kind of happy because they forgot to print the menu for 4 weeks anyways. Like, I think we have to consider where we can do the bulk of climate impact reduction without having to deal with all of this PR shit.
Well, I mean, you're right, and GMO was not a name that we came up with, though. We were left with it. We used to call it genetically modified or genetic, and then GMO came, and that then became the one that stuck. The negative framing always sticks. Anyway, can we have final comments, and we'll just have a quick, then we'll move on.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was gonna agree with Ia there. The main thing is level playing field, making sure that the food production, the different externalities, that the environmental harm is kind of put in the costs and so on, and that kind of then it's up to markets in a way to create the ideas and sell it to people. And I trust great marketers there, but of course the challenge here, what we're talking about, is how to make sure we can get these policies through. And there we can learn, I guess, from the GMO, from the energy side or something, and make sure that we talk in ways that are perceived positively.
I'll just add that we're doing our best, so that from the research side we're trying to support as much as we can with the projects that are available, and talking with people and trying to advance and increase the awareness and willingness to change behavior in the future.
Yeah, I think I couldn't just emphasize more the need for the kind of very inclusive discussion about this and the understanding. And for example, the VTT, I mean, the report that you were presenting this morning, it just explains very in simplistic terms, what is this all about? And I think the majority of Finns, for example, a majority of people couldn't extinguish what's what and what do we mean by this, and what are the pros and cons. So I think we just, we need to be a bit of patient still and really kind of patiently wait for the understanding to also spread around. And very boring and slow answer, but I think that's reality.
That's your job. That's your job. You're from the ministry.
So I think from our perspective at Solar Foods, where we put the emphasis on is that we, I go to a lot of places like this. So giving talks, explaining to people what it's about, inviting people like you came last night to actually, get the proof of the pudding, quite literally, is important. The way you also communicate and how you communicate. So Atte, you mentioned this kind of space thing. It's two things there that I think benefits us, which is one is that I mentioned in my talk that it's the ultimate test of a circular economy, really ultimate. Life doesn't get more circular than in space. So that's one thing. The other thing is that no matter who you are here on the planet, and and you hear that astronauts are consuming foods that contain our protein, will know that it's not going to be junk or bad for you because astronauts won't be fed junk. Typically people will say, okay, I understand that the space food, that if you've seen documentaries of astronauts eating on board spacecraft, it's not super delicious, but it's at least from a health standpoint great. We are also, I think we're going to expand on this. So I'm already having some discussions with a private space station company, and we are actually aspiring to set up a private astronaut mission that would actually pack some Solein protein shakes to go up on the mission with the crew, get some footage, astronauts consuming Solein and get that kind of messaging through. And at the same time, of course, we're hosting lots of events, inviting people globally. And having a web page that be pretty much quite openly. We haven't published a genome there, but it's almost everything else has been.
Okay, we are out of time. Tea's giving me the evil eye. I'm going to go back to my main job doing IT. So let's also, yeah, I know. I'm sorry about that. Before we go, though, I'd like to thank our quadruple A supergroup, Atte, Arttu, Anu, and Anu, and please join me in giving them a big round of applause.